Awesome. Well, it looks like that is leveled out. So I think we can go ahead and get started. So welcome. This is our Financing Your Degree session. This is our last session of the year, so we are excited to see everybody here. If we want to go to the next slide, please. I can look at our agenda for today. So I'm going to cover a couple of details about living in Providence, some campus resources and things to know as a master's student. And then I will hand it off to our lovely colleague Francesca for the Office of Financial Aid at the end. And then we will do a live Q&A. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A function on your Zoom toolbar. And we will answer them kind of as we see them. I've got some colleagues working in the background on answering a couple. But if you have a good question that might be good for the larger group, we will probably hold on to that one until the end when we do our larger Q&A, just so we're sharing answers that might be helpful for everybody. Um, I also want to note that as an attendee of this session, you will be getting an application fee waiver for all non-SOFIS applications. It's valid for one application. If you are attending today using an email address that is different from the email that is attached to your application, please email us at masters_events@brown.edu and we can get that fixed for you. My colleague Holly also put that in the chat. Um, Francesca, would you like to introduce yourself before we get started?
Sure, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Francesca Savella, and I'm an assistant director in the Office of Financial Aid. I work with our graduate student populations as well as our undergraduate populations. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. So we can move to the next slide. Awesome. And we'll get started with living in Providence. Next slide, please. Great. So, for those of you who might be unfamiliar, this is the regional area of New England. It is the northeast area of the United States, including New York. If you're a New Englander, you might colloquially understand that New York maybe not be a part of that region, but we included it as a part of the Northeast. Here are some of the city hubs in the area. Um, our Brown University is located within Providence, Rhode Island, which is in the middle where all of those lines kind of connect. And you can see how close it is to other major cities like Maine, and Boston, Massachusetts, Albany, New York, New York City, Connecticut. Lots of fun areas nearby. We are looking a little bit at our rental prices. We are less expensive than most major metro areas, especially in the area, but we are about 11% higher than the national average. But we are 30% less than Boston, 34% less than Los Angeles, a little less than Washington, D.C., and 52% less than Brooklyn, New York. So rental is a little bit less expensive than the average in the area. If we want to go to the next slide, I can break that down a little bit more into neighborhoods. So this is a lovely little drawing of the neighborhoods within the city of Providence. It's the smallest state, a small city, but it does include a lot of neighborhoods and it has a lot of life in it. So if we're looking at rentals, if you see College Hill towards the middle of that map, that is where a lot of the Brown courses are held, but we have a wide spread throughout the city of Providence. For example, my office is in the downtown jewelry district area across the river, so we've got a large spread. Our students tend to live nearby. These are some of the popular rental neighborhoods. And now these prices that you're seeing are averages. So that first number, looking at that top one, College Hill, the average of 1940, that is an average for a one-bedroom apartment. And then that 2,227 is an average for the two-bedroom apartments. Um, so depending on what you're looking at, sizes, appliances, amenities, all of the things that you are kind of including in your decision making for your rental space. Those can also impact the price. And then roommates also are a great help. So thinking about cutting that in half with the roommate possibility. But these are some of the popular neighborhoods. And if you look at the little images, each neighborhood kind of has something that they're known for. Um, West End for the films. You're looking at Federal Hill for really good Italian food. Fox Point and Wayland Square are very artsy. Um, so really anywhere you go is kind of a fun little adventure. Next slide, please. So let's look at some pro tips for housing. Our number one tip, our top piece of advice is to start your search early. You're more likely to find choices in your price range the earlier you start. You can look at brownuniversityoffcampus.com for some off-campus housing options that we have found. Um, you can also look in the Providence Journal, the Graduate Student Listserv. There's lots of different avenues to finding rental properties. Um, and then consider your location as well when looking into where you want to be. Like I said, there's a lot of different neighborhoods surrounding Providence and the campus. The campus has a lot of reach into a lot of different neighborhoods. So look at maybe what your degree program is, what their main building is. Look nearby, look at public transportation routes. As a Brown student, you will get free ridership access to RIPTA, which is the Rhode Island Public Transportation Authority, their buses. And then Brown also has a shuttle that it runs on a loop through the campus and through the downtown area. So living nearby one of those stops can be really useful. And then while tuition is a fixed cost, your choices of influence or your choices will influence your cost of living, and those are indirect costs. So those are things like rent and groceries, things you do for entertainment, your hobbies, and then estimated living costs are meant to accommodate that kind of wide variety. So again, thinking about things like laundry facilities, maybe nice appliances, different amenities within the area, that is going to vary your cost of living. And then again, living alone, living with roommates, that can help as well. Next slide, please. Awesome. So campus resources and things to know. Next slide, please. Here is our Bear Bargains discount list. As a student at Brown, you will get access via your student ID to a bunch of different discounts in local businesses. So this is just a good list, but it's got all sorts of things from food to entertainment to like phone service, car and tire services, um, the Power Yoga and Orange Theory Fitness. There's acupuncture, so there's some health focused things there as well. It's a really well-rounded um, kind of gift, basically, that Brown gives you of, hey, here's some discounts. As a student, we know that financial things can be difficult, so we want to provide these opportunities, partnering with local businesses to kind of ease that a little bit as a student discount. Next slide, please. On-campus jobs, these are really great resources. A lot of these are hourly positions and not tuition waivers. So they are a paycheck in the form of just put it in your pocket, spend it how you see fit. It's not a tuition waiver, but they are open to all Brown students, master's students, international students. Yes, you are able to apply for student employment on campus. There are some visa restrictions to our international students that does limit you to working 20 hours a week. And you will need your I-9 form and your social security number. Those are going to be required for on-campus employment. Um, and these are going to be jobs like dining services, work at the bookstore, but this can also include teaching assistants, research assistantships, kind of all of the umbrella of on-campus jobs. So if you do have questions about student employment, you can email the student employment office, the student_employment at brown.edu. And they offer virtual office hours to assist you with any questions you might have about getting the job, about being paid for your job. And once you are enrolled, you will get access to Workday, which is the website where all of the open positions will be posted so you can see what's available. Those are going to vary every year depending on who already has that job, who's maybe staying on campus and keeping that job, who's graduating and opening that position. So they are going to be vastly different each year. Different teaching assistant and research assistant positions are going to vary by your specific program. So if you do have questions about program specific availability, I encourage you to reach out to your program directly because they are going to have the most accurate information regarding those roles. Next slide, please. Awesome. And now I can hand it over to our colleague Francesca to discuss the financial aid.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Next slide whenever you're ready. Nope, and we can go to the next slide. Thanks. So again, my name's Francesca, and I work as an assistant director with the Office of Financial Aid. I work with graduate and undergraduate level students. This page just includes some information about what we do. So the Office of Financial Aid can assist you with filing your FAFSA application, as well as understanding any issues or problems that may arise when trying to complete the application. We also are able to assist with managing and reviewing your cost of attendance budget that you would be assigned once you've enrolled into a specific academic program. And we also, in conjunction with reviewing and receiving your FAFSA applications, are also the office that will determine your eligibility for the Federal Direct Student Loan Program. Um, our contact information is included on this page. In general, we'd like to just let students know that we are available. So whether you have general questions or very specific circumstances you wanted to talk about, reach out to us at our email address. We can also schedule phone or Zoom appointments with you, but again, we are a resource available. Next slide, please. So this slide reviews departmental financial support. So decisions for graduate tuition support are made by a student's academic department in which they have applied for admission with. And that determination is shared with the student at the time in which they are admitted to that program. Department support offers are determined and usually considered final at the time in which they are shared with the student upon admission. After department support is offered, Office of Financial Aid uses the information from your FAFSA application to then determine your federal student loan eligibility for that given enrollment period. Next slide. So this slide goes over information regarding the FAFSA application. So the FAFSA application is the free application for federal student aid. For most, it would be a familiar application that you've likely completed when you were an undergraduate student. The application itself is available for students to complete whom are U.S. citizens and permanent residents. Filing the FAFSA application for graduate level loan support, federal loan support, is a requirement in order for our office to determine a student's eligibility for the federal direct unsubsidized loan for their period of enrollment. As just a tip to those that are considering submitting an application, there are currently two FAFSA applications out over at the studentaid.gov portal that you are able to complete. Dependent on when you are seeking admission to Brown, ultimately determines which FAFSA application you likely need to complete. So if you are a student that is applying for admission to an academic program in which enrollment would begin this spring 2026 term, then you would want to file the current academic year FAFSA, which is for the 25-26 year. If you're a prospective student considering enrollment either for the future summer 2026 term, fall 2026 term, or spring 2027 terms, you'll want to file a 2026-27 FAFSA. Accidents happen. If you filed the wrong FAFSA, our office can, of course, offer you information on which appropriate academic year application you need. There is no harm in completing the wrong FAFSA. Just know that those resources are both live and available for you to complete. And then just below that last bullet on this slide does offer the federal school code for Brown University Graduate School, which is the federal code you would include on your FAFSA, so our office ultimately can receive a copy of the download. Next slide. So this next slide talks about the CSS profile. So I do see some questions that have popped up with respect to international students applying for financial aid. So as the last slide mentioned, filing the FAFSA application for federal student loan eligibility is specifically for U.S. citizens and permanent residents. If you are not sure if you are eligible to file the FAFSA, I would recommend going to studentaid.gov and checking their eligibility tab to understand if you fall into the category to file. Otherwise, if you are an international student, you will not be able to file the FAFSA application. However, for most academic programs that are offering need-based graduate tuition support, they will ask a student to instead complete the CSS profile. That link and Brown University's code is included right on this slide. Um, the type of graduate tuition support that is offered by various academic programs here at Brown can include merit-based, need-based, or a combination of both. I recommend that you go to your specific academic programs department webpage, review information for applying for financial aid support to understand as an international student whether or not you would need to file the CSS profile. But again, if your department offers need-based support, they will have indicated on their webpage that as an international student, you would have the option to complete the CSS profile as your financial aid application for consideration. Next slide, please. So this next slide is offering you an estimated cost of attendance for enrollment in a program based on the standard graduate tuition rate for this current 25-26 academic year. Now, most programs for standard tuition will run a total of 9 months in which 8 courses are completed over that span of time. This breakdown of this estimated cost of attendance offers you a separation of direct costs, which means billable costs that you can expect to be charged from the university, assuming you enroll, as well as indirect costs, which are estimates of what you could expect to be paying in order to be an active student, an active participant in the program that you are enrolled in. So first we'll talk about direct costs. So again, direct costs are direct charges that a student should expect to be billed by the university upon their enrollment. So for tuition, this estimated breakdown is based on the current standard per credit tuition rate for this current academic year times 8 courses. So the tuition rate that you are seeing under direct costs encompasses the estimation of the entirety of your program, not just one term enrolled. Next, mandatory fees. So for all students that are actively enrolled for a given academic year, there are mandatory student fees that are assessed as part of being a student. Later on, I will talk about resources to gather information after today's presentation as it pertains to both charges as well as aid support. And I can offer you information on which online resources you can review to see the breakdown of those mandatory fees. The last direct charge has an asterisk next to it, and that is because this is an estimated waivable charge that ultimately a graduate student can either choose to opt in or opt out of, and that's university health insurance. So Brown University does offer an annual health insurance plan to all actively enrolled students. It is not a requirement for all students to take Brown University's health insurance plan unless they ultimately need it. It is a requirement for a student to have health insurance coverage while they are enrolled. So ultimately, if a student either does not have insurance of their own or their own private insurance is not applicable in the state of Rhode Island while they're here, They do have the option to opt into the Brown University Health Insurance Plan. For this current academic year, the cost of that insurance is $4,944. If you have insurance of your own and it is applicable to cover you based on where you will be, residing during your period of enrollment, again, you will have the option to waive the insurance prior to the start of your enrollment period. The next section on this slide, which is highlighted in yellow, these are indirect costs. So these are estimations of what a student could expect to be paying for the time in which they are enrolled. But please know, as Bryce even mentioned earlier, this is very flexible because it really depends on your circumstances and what makes sense for you. So whether you may be an online remote student in which you may not be moving, or in a case where you may be living with multiple roommates, which means your costs may be reduced. These again are just estimations. So we estimate for a full annual academic year to expect the following for housing and meals, personal expenses while enrolled, as well as a combination of books and course material supplies, as well as transportation getting around campus. Next slide. This slide talks a little bit more about the federal direct unsubsidized student loan, which is part of the federal student loan borrowing program. So this slide is really going to be applicable to students that ultimately will be eligible to file the FAFSA for purpose of borrowing this federal direct student loan. So for this current academic year, the 25-26 academic year, the current interest rate for the federal direct unsubsidized loan as assigned by the Department of Education is 7.94%. We will officially know what the 2026-27 interest rate will be come June of 2026. Historically, the Department of Education releases that in June of each for each new academic year. There is also an origination fee for students that are borrowing the federal direct unsubsidized student loan. For this current 25-26 academic year, that origination fee is 1.057%. So let's talk a little bit more about what this origination fee means. So an origination fee is essentially a loan processing fee that the Department of Education charges and keeps for themselves for the processing of your federal student loan. So to offer an example to understand that processing fee a little bit better, if you were to be offered as an example a $10,000 loan, and if we took 1.057% of that $10,000 loan, it would mean that you'd have an origination fee of $106. That $106 is what the Department of Education would essentially keep as part of that origination fee, meaning the net disbursement that you in turn would actually be receiving towards your billable charges with Brown would be $9,894. So the good thing, the origination fee is small. So in terms of understanding your gross and net disbursement, it is not a substantial difference in loss of what you'll be receiving, but this is important to be aware of and cognizant of, especially as you're budgeting. Next slide, please. So a little bit more on borrowing federal direct unsubsidized loan. So for all graduate level students who file a FAFSA application, the annual federal unsubsidized loan limit that the Department of Education will allow a student to borrow is $20,500. That is for a full academic year. Dependent on how many terms within an academic year a student ultimately will be enrolled, determines how that annual loan amount is essentially divided out. So, for example, if you are in an academic program where you are enrolled for 2 semesters, the fall and the spring, which is pretty traditional, then the expectation would be that your annual $20,500 loan is going to be divided evenly between those 2 semesters you're enrolled. How to essentially understand your loan eligibility. In the Office of Financial Aid, we use a very basic formula, which we are happy to share with you all. And this is really helpful when you're budgeting and you're determining costs and what makes sense for you as it pertains to enrollment. So essentially, how we determine this is we take your cost of attendance based on the academic program that you are looking to enroll in. We then subtract any graduate tuition support that has been offered to you by your academic department. And then we subtract out any external scholarships or resources that you may have earned having applied for those. The difference after subtracting out that support tells us what your remaining loan eligibility essentially is and how much in loan we would be able to offer you for your period of enrollment. Next slide, please. So, as it pertains to graduate level aid, loan eligibility, we say, is a moving target. And the reason for that is that there are circumstances that can arise that may impact your loan eligibility throughout a given year. So our office can't stress enough the importance of communication throughout an academic year in an effort to manage your funding, I think, in a conservative way, and to be able to be as transparent as possible with you, the student. So if you are ever expecting a change in your enrollment plan, or if there is a change to, say, a tuition charge for a given semester, a change to the amount in departmental scholarship support or external scholarship support you are receiving, it's important to communicate that with our office so we can, of course, then ensure that not only your cost of attendance, but your loan eligibility is accurate. Because what we understand is you don't need the added stressor of additional changes happening while you are in the midst of your programs. So again, communication, if you are either experiencing a change in circumstance or foreseeing that, is really helpful for all of us to be on the same page. Next slide, please. So this slide just offers some information about a partner office, Student Financial Services. So it is very common that questions that are meant to go to the Student Financial Services Office may come to financial aid. And while that is completely fine, we are happy to navigate questions to the right offices. We unfortunately can't always answer those questions. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about my office, financial aid, versus the Student Financial Services Office, just in an effort to separate what each office oversees, so you, of course, have the best resources available to you. So the Office of Financial Aid, which is the office I'm representing today, we accept and review FAFSA applications, as well as calculate and manage your cost of attendance and loan offers. The Student Financial Services Office is our office that essentially works like a bursar office. They manage anything to do with your billing, with payments to be made for billing, as well as refunds. So if a student ever had a question regarding their billing statement, their payment portal, setting up a monthly payment plan, how to apply for a refund and when to expect that refund back, those questions will be managed by the Student Financial Services Office. If you ever had questions or concerns pertaining to the financial aid process, as it would include your FAFSA or loan borrowing, that would come over to us in financial aid. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick resource to offer you, and it's a snapshot that we included from the Student Financial Services page. So I would really encourage you, especially if you're curious about reviewing cost of attendance for an academic program, just to better understand your tuition rate as well as those mandatory fees. logging in to sfs.brown.edu website. This will bring you to the Student Financial Services homepage where all that information lives. Beyond offering information on tuition and fees for your specific programs you may be interested in, the financial services webpage also offers a plethora of information regarding payment, and that includes anything from making term payments, setting up a monthly payment plan, which we'll talk more about in a couple of slides, as well as loan borrowing. So while earlier I had talked about the federal direct unsubsidized loan, which a graduate student may be eligible to borrow upon filing FAFSA, there are additional supplemental loans that exist that students may also borrow up to their cost of attendance to meet any gaps that they may have in covering costs, whether that be direct or indirect, like we talked about earlier. So I truly can't stress enough how useful the Student Financial Services webpage is, especially if you're starting, from scratch and you're really looking to understand what would it cost to do this program and what are my options and resources to cover those costs so I can be successful while I'm enrolled. Next slide, please. This next slide talks a little bit more about supplemental loan borrowing, which I just mentioned from that previous slide. So there are traditionally and historically have been two different types of loans that a graduate level student can borrow after they've taken their federal direct unsubsidized loan that's been offered to them upon filing FAFSA. With both of these loans that are listed on this slide, they do require an application to apply for them. You are not automatically offered this upfront based on filing FAFSA. But these both work as supplemental options for additional loan borrowing to meet any combination of costs that you have, whether that pertains to direct billable charges and or indirect costs like your housing, food, personal, and travel. The first, we'll talk a little bit about the Graduate Plus loan. So the Graduate Plus loan is a supplemental loan offered by the Department of Education that graduate students can apply for up to their cost of attendance. As a very important note, you may have heard as information is out in the public, there are changes coming to the federal Graduate Plus Loan program as of next academic year, the 26-27 academic year. In full transparency, especially for those planning future enrollment, as of the 26-27 academic year, the program itself will no longer be open to new borrowers. So if you are a student considering enrollment for the spring 2026 term, which is just, obviously a couple months away, you would still have access to apply for the Graduate Plus loan. If you are a prospective student considering enrollment anytime from summer 26 term into the future, this program will no longer be available to apply for. In terms of important information, we have listed the current academic year interest rate as well as origination fee that is attached to the Graduate Plus loan. For students that may be enrolling in the spring who would be eligible to borrow again into the next academic year, there will be updated interest rates and origination fees as of June that would, of course, apply to that future loan borrowing. For international students and new prospective students that will be enrolled as of the start of the 26-27 academic year, you will still have the opportunity to apply for private loan as a supplemental loan option to cover costs. back to the previous slide, I had mentioned that the Student Financial Services Office offers wonderful resources about loan borrowing. And this little snapshot that I've included regarding private education loans, this link is available over at the Student Financial Services homepage. This is a fabulous resource that I really advise checking out, especially if you are considering loan borrowing to meet your costs. With respect to private educational loans, these are loans that students can apply for that are offered through various private lenders, crediting agencies, and banks throughout the United States. There are lots of lenders out there, and it's ultimately up to the student whom they choose to work with. So the Student Financial Services Office on their website offers a really wonderful tool called the Fast Choice Loan Comparison Tool, which offers a significant listing of preferred lenders that our students at Brown traditionally work with as a means to assist you with starting navigating your search. You are not at all required to use any of the lenders that are on that list. But again, because there are so many out there, in an effort to just help the student navigate that process and really have an option to compare interest rates, repayment plans, grace periods. The fast choice comparison tool does that, which I think makes the process of considering private loan borrowing a whole lot easier to navigate because you're able to access really crucial information like interest rate information, like repayment information upfront before you actually submit an application. Next slide, please. So now this snapshot is from also the Student Financial Services homepage. This information again is available right on their website under their tab for payments. And this is a snapshot that talks about the installment payment plan, which is a monthly payment plan system that the Student Financial Services Office offers students whom are enrolled. So I've offered you a snapshot of what a fall and what a spring term payment plan may look like if you chose to enroll in one. So the Student Financial Services Office will allow students to set up per term an installment payment plan that can either stretch a span of 5 months or 4 months. There is a one-time $75 fee to enroll and use this installment payment plan, but there is no interest charged for paying on a monthly basis. Essentially, we are taking your balance that is due for a given term, then dividing that out evenly by either 5 or 4 months, and then you are expected to make that payment each month based on the payment dates that are listed in these different examples. Next slide, please. So this slide, while it looks a little long, I promise not to read it all out to you. This slide talks about what to understand and expect as it pertains to the process of your loans dispersing, getting your bills covered, your charges paid for, and potentially accessing a refund, assuming you have a credit, meaning an excess of financial aid left over after your direct charges are covered. So for discussion of refunds, at Brown, the Student Financial Services Office oversees refunds for the university. In general, the preferred method for submitting a refund back to a student is through ACH, so electronic payment. With that being said, if a student has a credit on their account for a given term because of an excess of financial aid, and for graduate students, that can be common, especially if you're borrowing loan up to your cost of attendance to cover both direct and indirect costs. You are able to request your refund as soon as the start of the new academic term. So, for example, if you're enrolled in the fall and the first day of fall term is September 2nd, you can submit a refund request on the Student Financial Services website September 2nd. And then, generally, within 3 to 5 business days, that credit will automatically process and disperse back to you via the ACH method. Students can go onto the Student Financial Services website to formally request their refund per term. There's 2 steps that a student has to complete in order to officially request their refund. The first step is logging on to your payment portal, which you would eventually have access to, assuming you enroll. And you would basically set up your ACH information so the SFS office can process your refund back to the best checking or savings account you've offered. The second step is submitting a refund request form. Essentially, it's a Google form that's available for students to complete that is authorizing that the SFS office actually release your excess funds back to you versus having those funds remain on your student billing account. The last bullet that we have on this page, I do want to spend some time on because it's really important. And this goes back to earlier in this presentation when Bryce was talking about living expenses and, rent in Providence and considering costs. Um, if you are ultimately a student that is planning on borrowing loan to cover those indirect costs like housing, assuming you need to do so, and the plan is to use your excess loan as a refund to pay for those costs. It's really, really important that you are planning out your living expenses in conjunction to when a refund is going to process. Brown University cannot process a refund for a given term any earlier than the first week that that term actually begins. So, to throw out an example, if you're starting in the fall term and the fall term begins in September, but you're moving to Providence in August, and that's when your lease starts, you will not have access to your refund until September. So you will need to budget accordingly to be able to cover your costs for August until that refund money is allowed to be processed. And that's because loan borrowing, as it pertains to being enrolled in a program, a graduate level degree program, is tied to your enrollment, which is why we cannot release funds until we know you're actually in class. Next slide, please. Well, I'm done talking, and I'm sure you're tired of hearing from me. So this last slide again is just our contact information. We can appreciate everyone has different circumstances and questions, so don't be a stranger. Reach out to us via the email. If you want to set up a phone appointment, a Zoom appointment, we're happy to do so. We'll send out our availability. And thank you again so much for listening and for having me with you today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Francesca. That was great. I just put that email in the chat as well. If we can move to the next slide, please. We can look at our next steps. So you can view and register for upcoming events on this webpage. We are at the end of our events cycle. So there might be a few program specific sessions left. I think it's worth looking if you're still interested. But you can also connect with me and my team. You can look for BrownU_masters on Instagram to see any cool events that we're doing, kind of keep up to date with all of the cool happenings, or you can email us, and that's masters_events@brown.edu. And then just remember to submit your application by your program's deadline. If we move to the next slide, we can go ahead and start some Q&A. So if you do have any questions for either Francesca or me, you can add them into the Q&A on your Zoom toolbar, and we will be happy to answer those questions. If we can move to the next slide while we're kind of giving y'all some time, I just wanted to be sure that you have our contact information. You can give us a call, you can look at our website, you can send us an email, but all that information is there, and the financial aid email is in the chat. And then I do see a raised hand. I'm going to ask that you put your question in the Q&A function, please. Thank you. Let's see. Do any programs provide merit-based grants to help cover tuition? Francesca, are you
Yep, I'm
able
happy
to
to
answer
answer
that?
that.
Thank you.
So earlier in the presentation, there was a slide talking about departmental support. So when a student applies to a respective academic program for admission, your academic program that you're applying with will consider um, your eligibility for merit and or need-based graduate tuition support based on what your academic program offers upfront, and that information would be conveyed to you at the time of admission. So some academic programs offer both a need-based and a merit-based graduate tuition support. Some only offer merit-based. So I can't stress enough the importance of checking out your respective academic program's webpage that you're interested in applying with. Checking out their financial aid information on that webpage to best understand what type of scholarship their specific program can offer. If you then have questions about how, regarding like how much is available, what it would look like, the process to apply, I then would advise directing that to your academic program because they ultimately are who oversees that determination.
Thank you. Also, I think that answered actually a couple of questions I had. Um, I did see a question. Is this session going to be recorded somewhere for us to watch later? Yes, we will be emailing you a copy of this recording. It'll also be on our YouTube page. Um, let's see. I believe you might have just answered this, Francesca, but is the school given aid coming from the department master's program or is it coming from an allotted amount within the program?
Yeah, so at Brown, funding for graduate tuition support is program to program. So specifically, you'd want to be just focused on submitting questions to the academic program that you are interested in applying with, because they would have their own funding that they then independently determine how they divvy it out. Each academic program is different in terms of how much funding they have available, how they spread that funding out to students that are admitted. Also, like I mentioned earlier, what type of funding, need-based, merit-based, etc. So I think to best understand what would apply to you, I again would advise reaching out to your department's manager, your academic program manager, or their, general email. To let them know that you're interested in applying, that you have some questions about, graduate tuition support and in general, what those offers may look like for students admitted.
And thank you. And then could you please provide a little more details about scholarships and financial support for international students?
Sure. So, as it pertains to international students, the answer is pretty similar. If it has to do with any kind of graduate tuition support, scholarship, which, traditionally is free money, right? We don't pay scholarship back. Whether you're international or domestic, it is determined by your academic program at the time of admission. In terms of whether or not, as an international student, you will need to file the CSS profile, that information is determined by your academic program and is going to be available for you to review on their respective website. International student will only need to submit the CSS profile if you are interested in seeking need-based scholarship from your academic department, and that is assuming your academic department has that information on their website, meaning they offer it. If they do not offer need-based aid, then you don't need to do the CSS profile. So again, that information lives on each academic department's homepage, and that is the best resource to understand what exactly applies to you based on the program that you're interested in.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That did answer a couple of questions that just came up, so I'm just marking those as completed because you did just answer all of those. And then does Brown or their individual programs do so-called top-ups when a student manages to secure an external scholarship similar to other universities?
So with top ups, what I think you're referring to, what the student may be referring to is last dollar scholarships. So in a previous slide in this presentation, what we had essentially gone over was a formula that we use to understand loan eligibility that is impacted by external scholarship. So every student, dependent on your program, and how many courses you would be enrolled in for an academic year, has a cost of attendance. We, the total in your gift money, external scholarship, and loans cannot exceed that cost of attendance for a given academic year. So, as it would apply to external scholarships being a topper, first, we would apply any graduate tuition support given to the student by their program. Then we would apply any federal loan that the student is eligible for, assuming they filed FAFSA. Then we would apply external scholarship. If the total of that external scholarship is more than the limit of that cost of attendance, we would have to reduce loan. But if your concern is, could external scholarship reduce my graduate tuition support? No, it does act as a topper, meaning that it's applied after that grad tuition support has already been offered by your program.
Thank you. So our next question I'll take, what is the process of requesting and applying for funding for travel-focused research projects within the master's? I'm going to put a link in the chat. This leads to our Master Student Professional Development Fund page, and this can help our master students um, seek different professional development opportunities, including conferences or seminars. So that link is going into the chat right now. It is current students slash professional development slash travel funding. And that will give you some more information about how to apply. There is some limited funding through that. It'll be submitted through U funds, and there is limited funding availability. It does not guarantee support, but there is a process to receive up to $500 on a one-time basis to cover registration costs, travel, and accommodation expenses. Awesome. And I believe that is all of our questions. All right. Well, thank you so much to my colleagues, to Francesca. Um, oh, we got a follow-up actually. Francesca, sorry, what I meant was, e.g., a student is offered an external scholarship, but the total amount of money is not fully enough to fund the student because if the scholarship is prestigious and obtained externally, some universities offer the rest of the money to the student. So the student ends up fully funded. Does that happen at Brown?
Sure, and thank you to the student who clarified. No, that does not happen at Brown. So in terms of the process that, any kind of scholarship would work as it at least pertains to Brown University, based on the academic program you apply for, in and the funding that is available from that program, they will determine and offer you some level of graduate tuition support if eligible, if determined that you're eligible at the time of admission. In terms of external scholarship, regardless of the amount, there is no matching. So if your question is referring to does either an academic program or the financial aid office match external scholarships in an effort to fully fund a student? No, that is not a practice. However, if you do have a substantial external scholarship, and it fits within your cost of attendance, ultimately covering your full costs, possibly even leaving excess, then in that scenario, that would be fine. But we would not meet that. Um, the last piece that I just want to mention, this seems like a fairly specific question. There may be more to it. Um, I would advise emailing the graduate student financial aid address. I'm happy to either, have a phone conversation or for us to flesh this out a little bit more. But again, to all students that are still with us, specific questions or circumstances that, may involve yourself, feel free to reach out so we can offer an individualized answer that best helps you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Awesome. Well, thank you again to Francesca, to my colleagues online, and to each one of our attendees. It was great having you. I hope that you learned something and we were able to help answer some of your questions. Again, if you do have any other questions after the session, you can email us at masters_events@brown.edu. It's on your screen, it's in the chat. Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your morning. Bye.